The scripture reading for tonight comes from Galatians chapter 6, verses 9 and 10. We must not grow weary in doing good, for in due time we will reap if we do not give up. So then, whenever we have an opportunity, let us do good to all people, and especially to those who belong to the family of faith.
Big button. Yep, great. Hello, everybody. I thought it was quite funny when we were singing Help Me Know You Are Here. And then I'm like, Scout's telling us he's here. Did you hear him? Look, welcome to 2026. I know I'm a whole month late. But I've been missing in action for most of January, but now I'm back. For those of you who don't know, I took a couple of months of unpaid leave to go and write a book chapter for a new handbook of the Gospel of Luke in the book of Acts. And lots of you have been asking me, how did that go? And I've been giving pretty much the same answer to everybody, and that is, not very well. It's a bit of a mess. It's a complete dog's breakfast. There's words all over the place. Some of them are good, most of them are mediocre. I'm sure I'll get there at some point. I work best under pressure, and so I'm expecting it to come together any day now. So anyway, on the flip side, I've spent basically 2 months in the book of Acts, and this has given me a whole new appreciation for that part of the Bible, and I'm hoping to share my enthusiasm with you over the coming months. In 2025, if you were here, you'll remember we spent a lot of time looking at the teachings of Jesus. We looked at a different teaching each month, amongst a few other things. And so it makes sense, really, now to look at, well, how did those teachings impact the early church? And what did the early church do with what Jesus taught them? So just like Paul kind of wandered all over the place in the book of Acts, if you know about the book of Acts, we're going to do a bit of wandering through Acts ourselves this year. To be honest, Acts was never really a favourite book of mine. All that geography, it just seems so far away, and all those stories about people who just lived so long ago. If you grew up in the church, maybe you've always thought of Acts as like a history book of the early church. Well, I really want to challenge that notion and say that it's a whole lot more than that. It is a book that is going to help us to think about how our faith changes the way we think about the world, how we think about politics, how we think about economics, how our society operates. It kind of unpacks what it means to follow Jesus together in a community, and I reckon that's worth checking out. So it's a book about crossing boundaries. It's a book about rethinking social taboos. And I'm wondering how this book could impact us as a congregation. You're going to hear a bit more about that in 2 weeks' time when we come back from the board retreat. In the meantime, Tracy's going to be speaking next week, and I think that will be really worthwhile too. Some of our small groups, I believe, are going to focus on Acts. I never tell small groups what they should do or what they shouldn't do, but I believe that the Wednesday groups are planning on kind of dipping into Acts, perhaps among some other topics. The Tuesday night monthly online group is also going to be exploring Acts. So we're just going to be into Acts. And I'm hoping that you'll end up with the same enthusiasm that I have. We're not going to be spending every week in looking at Acts, though, because we did an end-of-year survey and asked people what sermon topics would be helpful for you. And so, here's the first one. More than one person requested a sermon on hell. Well, I'm up for that. In fact, since I've arrived at MCC about 4.5 years ago, I've been wanting to do a mini-series called Heaven, Hell and the Afterlife. So I reckon this year that's going to happen. More than one person requested a sermon on self-care and self-compassion from a Christian perspective. Another really important topic, and not one to treat lightly. And so I've got my feelers out for a qualified speaker to talk about that one. Several people wanted something to do with the Apostle Paul. The Apostle Paul's theology, the letters that he wrote. Well, interestingly, of course, Acts is the bridge between the Gospels and the letters of the early church. And so when we get to the part where Paul enters the story of Acts, we're going to take a little short detour into how Paul has been used and how Paul's been misused, understood and misunderstood. We're going to find out about how one guy about 500 years ago influenced the way that most Christians think about Paul's theology today, and how one guy about 47 years ago changed everything and set us on a different path, which most of the church hasn't caught up with yet. So that'll be interesting. Someone wanted to find out about the Bible and slavery. Great topic, and not just for the chance to delve into how slavery was viewed by the people in the Old Testament and the people in the New Testament, but it also gives us a chance to think about how slavery operates today and what the Bible might say that could help us to think about that. Whole bunch of other suggestions that I'll try and squeeze in here and there on the biblical concept of service, Christians in the workplace. One person has requested this at least 2 years in a row, perhaps 3. So I feel like I have to talk at some point. That story about the demons being cast into the pigs, it's weird, isn't it? And so somebody is really confused about that and would like to hear some thinking around that. Some more sermons on love, sermons on tricky passages. And there's a very interesting suggestion about exploring LGBTQ pride, contrasting that with the sin of pride and humility. I reckon that's interesting. So maybe we'll play around with that one. You see, I take your suggestions seriously. Do you see that? And that is the advantage of doing the end of year survey. You get to choose your own sermon adventure. We only had 37 responses to the survey this time, and last year we had about 60. I don't know if that was because I promised a free GYG meal, which Matthew ended up, a table service and everything. Although I do believe that there was a few little random prizes given out every now and again. But the survey responses are just so helpful to me and so helpful to the board in understanding where our congregation's at and in planning things. And so I put a special request in to Kenny this week. Could we please reopen the survey just for 5 days? 5 days. You've just got 5 days starting today. And so Kenny's worked his magic. There's the QR code. If you haven't completed the survey and you have been a part of MCC for more than a couple of months, I would love it if you could take 5 minutes to let me and the board know your thoughts. In fact, I won't be offended if you start tapping on your phone right now, which I see a few people are doing. Complete the survey now. You know, skip the questions that you don't really want to answer or they just take too much effort. That's fine. So there's the QR code. It'll be on the screen at the end of the service as well. The URL will be there if you don't do QR code scannings. I'm going to put it in Slack and it'll be in Thursday's newsletter, but then it'll be done because that is when our board retreat happens. Do I need to go back? No, let's not mess with the little gizmo. So board retreat next weekend. We're going to be looking at the survey data, things like what suburbs people live in. We don't ask for your address, but that helps us to plan things. Feedback to the board. We take any constructive criticism seriously, even if we find it hard to hear. We do. thought I would let you know exactly what we're going to do at the board retreat. We're going to be spending most of Saturday focusing on working together as a board. We've got 3 new board members this year from August last year. And so we've got somebody coming to help us understand who we are as 8 individuals and what magic happens when you put those 8 individuals together. So she's going to help us see what our strengths are, what we're not so great at, where the gaps are, how we can continue to develop a leadership culture where it's safe to disagree and have robust conversations. We've been working on that for a while. How we can listen well to each other and value the different perspectives around the table. How we can avoid doing busy work because we do not want to burn these people out. They give of their time so generously. So we'll discuss what we can do, what we can't do, what's sustainable for a group of volunteers who have busy lives. So that's what we're going to do on Saturday. And then on Sunday, our focus is going to be the whole church. Where we are as a church, who we are as a church, how can we continue to grow as a place of grace for people to explore faith and God and life together. Where we're going to look at what things are growing, what things are changing, what's dying, what's emerging, where there's life and how we can nurture that, how we can enable and support people to serve in areas that really fill their cup, what we can do to facilitate healthy connections between people. Because I don't know if you've noticed this, but I think that's how God seems to work in churches, is through people interacting with people. Always interested in the book of Corinthians, because when Paul talks about worship, he talks more about the horizontal dimension than he talks about the vertical. And I find that really interesting. Maybe God is also interested in the horizontal aspect. Those of you who may be new to our church, or maybe you've just forgotten because we haven't talked about it for a while, the underlying philosophy of the board in leading the church is a concept called rewilding. Rewilding, it's kind of this environmental concept of letting nature take its course rather than coming up with a landscaping plan with artificial paths and trees all planted in rows. That's not what we want to do. As a board, what we want to avoid doing is trying to plan things into existence, coming up with grand schemes and then busily trying to whip up the congregation to get in line. We don't want to do that. We think that a better way forward is to notice what's emerging in our congregation, what God might be growing at MCC, and pay attention to that. We want to stay out of the way of things that are already growing well, because, you know, we could accidentally kill them with too much attention. I don't know what your indoor plants look like. And to have the courage to let some things die. And to nurture new things that seem to be emerging naturally. So that's kind of our underlying philosophy. It has been for a number of years. Last year, the board was very good at staying out of the way when someone organised a plant swap before and after church. Someone had a Thanksgiving meal at their house. Someone organised dinner out at a local tavern. Someone organised a winter solstice gathering at the beach. Someone invited the whole church to a high tea at their house. And none of these things were official church events planned and organised by the board or a committee. They happened because of the initiative of one or more people. And that is the sign of a healthy, vibrant church. One tool that's sort of accidentally but incredibly useful for our church has been Slack, our in-house social media platform where members of our community can communicate, they can pray for one another, share snippets of life together. We do have a weekly newsletter that comes out, and it's got details of events, but so much more happens on Slack during the week. Most of the rosters get organised via Slack. The small groups at least some of them, each have their own space there too. The general discussion channel and the prayer request channel get such heavy use during the week. Last week we found out that Margaret watches Home and Away. And that last Saturday's pool party was accompanied by a rainbow, or at least that's what the pictures on Slack showed. An awful lot of rainbow photos get posted, I'm finding. You can also use Slack to chat with others at MCC Brisbane, so direct messaging. And I looked this up the other day because you can kind of look at analytics, like roughly like how many people are using Slack. There's usually between 60 to 70 people reading or posting messages on Slack in any given week. You will find last-minute invitations there, spare tickets to stuff, going begging on Slack. Somebody can't go, here's 2 tickets, anyone want them? So if you're keen to stay in the loop and you're not on Slack, talk to me or like half the congregation here and just keep asking around if somebody doesn't know how to put you on Slack, or come and talk to me and we can send out an invitation and organise for you to be on there. Of course, more formal events and opportunities happen as well. We have had wonderful camp committees over the last few years, have organised our annual camp each year. People get involved in worship leading. All of the people you saw up here are volunteers. People run our AV system for the church services. Sometimes not an easy task. People prepare the PowerPoint, design the newsletter. Someone does a head count so we know roughly how many chairs to put out. In 2026, we want to continue to encourage people to find a way of doing what they love to contribute to our church. So if you play an instrument, talk to Shane or somebody else on the worship team, Mark, Ryan. If you love baking, talk to Christine. If you want to get to know people but you're a real introvert, then talk to Jenny Bray, who is our tea and coffee roster coordinator this year, because you'll get to meet heaps of people without having to come up with topics of conversation. If you think that you would like to fill up tiny little cups with blackcurrant cordial, with a gizmo that's specifically designed to do that, then talk to Sean and he will put you on the communion roster. If you are good at making people feel welcome, you can join the greeters who welcome people as they walk through the door. Do you have muscles and have a recurrent and persistent desire for order? If you do, we need people to put out chairs in nice, neat rows. I'm very bad at that. You see, there's opportunities for everybody here. And even better, if you sign up to volunteer, it's not like Hotel California, where you can check out any time but never leave. That's not how we run things. At the end of every year, all the volunteer opportunities are up for review. We don't assume that people are just going to continue what they did in the same role forever. We encourage you to decide, what do you want to be involved in for the next year? So at the end of last year, some people decided to take a break in 2026 and step down from weekly roles that they had. Some decided to try something different. Others are happy to continue doing what they did last year. All of those are options, and none are like, put up on a pedestal and the others are condemned. They're all great options. And of course, you can opt out any time. It'd be great if you gave as much notice as possible, because our volunteer coordinators are volunteers, and of course they've got to find people to fill your spot. And if you have committed to something, one week, like a Bible reading or something like that, and you find yourself unable to do it, it's great if you can find somebody who can fill in for you. And then, of course, if you can't, the volunteer coordinator can help you out. A few years ago, we held a congregational meeting to talk about what's important to us as a congregation and how we want our church to operate. And that meeting resulted in our ways of working together. These are 4 principles that we try to live by as a congregation. And I try to mention these a few times a year. We know we won't get them right all the time, but they're kind of things that we aim for. So our ways of working together, number one, is that we're a really diverse congregation, and we seek to value and respect the diversity that we have of people, beliefs, opinions, and experience within our congregation, because we know that diversity makes us a better, stronger congregation. We understand that conflict can fester when you put a whole heap of quite different and diverse people in the one room, and that can escalate quickly. And so we aim to handle interpersonal conflict early with vulnerable honesty and only involve the people who need to be involved. We try to stay focused on solving the problem rather than attacking the person. And we aim to understand the other person's point of view, especially when we disagree. Privacy and confidentiality are particularly important in our congregation. And so we're cautious about sharing other people's personal information. That includes stories and photos and videos that might be sensitive. We endeavour to check in with people if in doubt. And finally, we seek to continually grow in personal maturity and self-awareness, taking responsibility for our own behaviour, our own feelings, our own boundaries. We're not afraid to apologise, and we're not afraid to get help when we need it. These things have served us really well in the past. And they're kind of like our ceiling. You know, we're not going to get there. We're not going to do this perfectly. But that's what we aim for. That's the ceiling that we kind of aspire to. We also have a thing called a code of conduct. If our ways of working together are our ceiling that we aspire to, then our code of conduct is like the floor, like the minimum standards of acceptable conduct. It outlines things that we won't tolerate, things like harassment, discrimination, assault, theft, or destruction of property, overstepping reasonable boundaries of consent. And there are very clear definitions in our code of conduct of what those words mean. They're commonly understood legal definitions. You can find the code of conduct on our website. There's also a link to it in our weekly newsletter, or you can ask me to send you a link if you can't find it. Because we prioritise the safety and well-being of attendees. And that means that on a very, very few occasions over the last couple of years, we've used that code of conduct to ask people to adjust their conduct or to leave for a temporary period of time or even to leave permanently. That rarely happens, but it's there if we need it, because being inclusive does not mean turning a blind eye to behaviour that causes significant harm. And that's not in any way intended to discourage romantic relationships or healthy friendships. It's intended to discourage predatory and harmful behaviour. That's why we have it. So please speak up if you see something that concerns you. You can speak to a board member, you can speak to me, you can fill out that little form. See, I've got it circled right down the bottom. This is the front page of our website. Great photo. But we've got a form there. If you have concerns and you want to express them, that form goes to me automatically. While you're on the website, you can also see our Safe Church framework. It's there too, outlining our commitment to safety to those who attend MCC. This sermon's just been a long string of kind of announcement-y things, but I wanted to put those things out there for 2026 before we dive back into some more regular sermons. We have a really special community here. If you've been here for a while, then you're part of the reason why. If you're looking for utopia, you know, you might be disappointed because, you know, we're all imperfect people here. That's why we need this stuff. That's why we need Jesus. That's why we need Jesus' teaching. If you're looking for a community to belong to, where you can explore faith and life and God and the way of Jesus without having to fit into predetermined boxes on what those things should look like, then I reckon we're a pretty good option. I am very glad to be back. I genuinely missed you. I tried so hard not to keep checking Slack, and I succeeded for a period of time. I'm really looking forward to seeing how 2026 unfolds for us as a congregation. I feel very optimistic.